experiences, usually I'm you. Mm-hmm. I'm the interviewer.
Yeah. But usually,
so I try to make people as comfortable as I possibly can.
But look behind him. Just think of that.
Look at that.
With the brain, just think of the brain.
You're the one who bought it for him.
The CF fluid coming out of the brain right there.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
I'm a guy with this thing. That's all I gotta say. I got duct tape behind it. I sacrifice. I can't
was
get.
Say, man, I could put that up a little bit better with Velcro on the back or something like that, and make it a little bit.
Oh, there's so many things.
It's even crooked. So if you open up that door, if you ever went in there to get something,
I get 1/16 of my shirts. However, I can't open it.
I know, that's what I mean.
This door first because I made that mistake.
This one? What'd you do? I
fixed it.
That's why it's crooked. It wasn't crooked before.
Is that thing literally just sitting on the door handle?
Yeah. I got a half a nail in here.
Maybe you can fix.
You nailed into the.
No, there better not be a nail in there.
There it is. He's got one in there. Why didn't you just say, "Hey, Dad"? Could you just?
You were at work.
Killing me. Changing.
What about that hole right behind Mom's head?
That's not the whole story.
That's been there for years.
That's not the whole story. This one.
Oh God, you get throughout this house. Even the ones that I patched, I've never really painted over.
My room looks like a room that should have been padded up, but wasn't padded up. That's how many holes there are and stuff.
Oh God.
You don't know holes until you saw Daddy's hole when he was young.
Oh, our basement, our doors.
See that blue notebook right there? Looking through baseball cards. I don't know whose notebook that was. I think it was yours. That blue binder.
Yeah,
it had Bob Seger in it. And I don't know if John was like, or John, I don't know if Dave was big into Bob Seger.
That was mine.
No,
I read Bob Seger all over top of my middle school notebook.
Anyway, any questions?
No, start from the top. What do you have here? I haven't looked. Wait,
it's
are these
the same thing? It's just one copy.
Why don't you want a copy then?
Oh, there's 2 copies?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't write that much.
I know, that's what I thought.
It was during bail reviews.
Start from the top.
Start from the top.
Start from the top, man.
All right.
So actually, I wanna give a big you're welcome to everybody who's been on my case. You have been behind Becky. Actually, you guys probably tied for like the most wanted as for guest. Especially a lot of guys that are older than me. They all desperately want to hear my dad because they don't. There's no podcast that has like a son father. Usually podcasters are a lot older than me. They probably have life experience, but I don't care about that. My life experience is what I've lived up to, and I can't control the future. You know what I mean? So I want to say thank you for coming on the podcast.
You're welcome. My pleasure. I
appreciate it. I want to say thank you to Becky. She is. They can't because they can only hear it through here. She is the reigning #1 guest we've had on the podcast. Soon to be booted out by her husband.
More than happy to take second place to Becky.
There you go.
Not a problem. Put my ego aside, pride aside. We're all good.
So Robert Labs, where were you? I always tell people always ask me like when football season comes around, like who's your favorite football team? I always gotta tell them the Packers, and then they ask me why. I say my dad's from there. But then in my head it was like, oh, your mom just accidentally had you in Sheboygan.
You know what? It was kind of wasn't an accident probably that she had me, but the reason why we were in Sheboygan was an accident. My pops was teaching at the University of Sheboygan, Wisconsin, teaching history and political science at the time. And when I was born, he actually wasn't there. He was down accepting a federal job, working down at the Pentagon in D.C. So he eventually came on back up. I should say Virginia. That's not D.C. It's a big building, though. But so he eventually came back up. And so I was born in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. The reason why probably you're a Packer fan is that you were properly indoctrinated.
Yeah.
Just like I was brainwashed also. Because my pops is a big, both my parents grew up in Wisconsin. So they were, my dad was just a big old Green Bay Packer fan. He loved Vince Lombardi. So that's kind of what I grew up with also. Of course, while I was a fan, that was the 1970s, lean years. They were terrible, but I was still a fan. Mm-hmm. You know, that's how I learned how to work the keyboard on a typewriter. I would type up the whole roster, where they were playing, the depth charts and everything else. Yeah, loser. But we didn't have video games, so I was like 8, 10 years old. I'd be down on my mother's typewriter, typing it up, the backups, the starters.
That's like the equivalent of a video gamer nowadays.
Pretty much.
You know what? And that kind of flows into, so born in Wisconsin, moved down when I was about 3 years old or so, and basically grew up in Prince George's County, Beltsville. Shout out to Beltsville.
Yeah.
PG.
PG.
Started working when I was about 9 years old, I guess. Had my
Paid?
paper route. Oh yeah, and
Under the
that
table?
is the reason. No, paper route, Washington Post.
15, I thought it was working limit.
No, 9 years old.
Oh my God.
Did it with my brother. My brother's 14 months older than me, and
Sorry.
no, that's fine. So we would deliver the paper, and we were smart enough because my brother was a pretty innovative businessman at 10, 11 years old. We would get our sister, the oldest of the three of us, to go out and collect. Every month you had to go out and collect the bill. I think it was $7.50 or so. And they were more apt to give a big tip to my sister than they would be to some little dorks like us. So we made more money by getting her to collect for us. We just delivered the newspaper. But by having that job, I could afford to buy video games for my Intellivision, which was kind of like an Atari on steroids.
You said television?
Intellivision.
I don't even know what that
It
is.
was a video game. But it was so cool. It was so much better than Atari. Like Atari had Space Invaders and Pong and things like that. We had football. We had baseball. We had basketball. We had hockey. Television was cool. And then I also had my own lawn cutting company. Well, basically it was me. So that was the company. So I was making good money when I was young. And I could afford my own television, my own video system. So times were good back then.
I always
I was
wonder,
living
like,
large.
I'm always like super curious, like where like my, I guess, quote unquote, entrepreneurial stuff came in. And I've always kind of assumed. I always like assumed, like I didn't really know where, I've always had a job from, I guess, if we still worked off the Chinese rules, I would have a job at 9 years old. But 15 is 9 months, or 15 is 6 months. And then from 15, I was, working full time since sophomore year of high school. And then whatever, selling chips or all the coins that mom gave me, I would just buy Doritos, save them for fourth period, and then flip them, make 50 cents. And then I'll just invest that again next week with shoes and everything. I've always wondered where that came from. So hearing you say, there's a difference between having your own lawn company, but then using your resources, aka your sister, who was a female, to make more money.
Yeah, and I'll say that business part of it kind of came more from my brother.
Mm-hmm.
He was a more innovative thinker when it came to things like that. Like my pops used to have this thing that he'd say, success comes off your backbone, not your wishbone. So the work ethic, you definitely have the work ethic.
Yeah.
I mean, straight up, you've always been a hard worker. Hell, you were managing people twice your age when you were, I don't know, 18 years old? Three times. If they lived that
Four
long,
times.
yeah, because some of them had issues.
I had an 82-year-old. No,
But,
78.
I was kind of I was always looking for ways to make money. I'd stop by. We used to have this little corner store in Beltsville. It's called Bowlers. And we would stop by there. I would stop by there. Me and, I can't really say names, I guess, but.
You can.
You can?
Yeah, of
So
course.
me and Gloria Pease would stop by the Bowlers on the way to school. We'd buy Now and Later, Starburst,
What are now and laters?
bottle caps. They're
He's
old
pissed.
school
I don't know.
candy. They're old school candy, but they still sell them. It's crazy. Like if you get down to the, what the heck, Five and Below, they sell Now and Laters.
Not like the antique store?
But we would buy this stuff called Nippet. So Nippet is kind of like a scope. So Nippets came in these little tiny packages, little bottles, and it was like 70% alcohol. So we would buy a bunch of those for like 40 cents at the Bowlers, and we'd go to school and we'd sell them for $1. And these kids would drink them. All it was is to freshen your breath. But then they'd pretend like they were drunk.
Because it had alcohol in it.
Well, they thought they were supposed to be drunk, right? So they'd get all pumped up. So I'd just sell this stuff big time. And then I had a pen repair business.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Holy
So I had
crap.
So I'm throwing out names. So this kid named Nihar Mohanty, who was, I don't know, 10 times starter than me. Like he eventually became a federal prosecutor. But he and I had this business where we would fix people's pens. So we would take out the old ink cartridge out of the old pens, put them into their broken pens because, well, they ran out of ink. And then we would take money to fix their pens and we put them in this old pencil box. We weren't the brightest though because we put holes in the pencil box and put a lock on the pencil box. What were the pencil boxes made out of? Cardboard. So, and I'm not going to say his name, but this one kid in our class liked money too. So he just broke into our pencil box and stole all our money. But anyhow, so to get back, so born in Wisconsin, moved down to Maryland, grew up in Maryland. I was lucky because when I was very young, my mother was a teacher by trade and my dad was too. And so they kind of taught me everything I needed to know for elementary school. So I went into, and so being a little kid was pretty cool. My mom would take me out on these big nature hikes. I learned so much about animals, birds, bugs. I knew anything and everything. Now it was a payback on her because I used to collect snakes. And so I'd be bringing home snakes, which she wasn't a real big fan of, any and every type of snake. We would catch sometimes 15, 20 snakes at a time, bring them home. Then she'd make me take them back. But so I went into elementary school knowing whatever you're going to learn in elementary school, basically. The multiplications, subtractions, additions, all that stuff. So I kind of went into those primary years of school and doing pretty well. Second grade, they decided they wanted to put me in talented and gifted and everything. So they saw something that I had already been taught. So elementary school was cool with me. And I played sports. I mean, that's what we did in the neighborhood. If we weren't riding bikes, we were playing sports. Football, baseball, basketball, all the time. So it was a great neighborhood to grow up in. I grew up in a great neighborhood. So elementary school, great years, great fun, nothing but fond memories. So where do we go?
No, that's just a lot. Like it's the pen. I want to go back to the alcohol thing.
Yeah.
You guys could just walk into a store and just buy alcohol?
Yeah, it was small. Yeah, they were a little nippet.
The 5-hour energy drinks you get?
Yeah, but that's...
Well, they were even smaller now. They were just little tiny things, and they were real
shot
cheap.
Of alcohol.
And, like, for instance, we'd buy... It's been a long time, obviously. But we'd buy, like... it was a breath freshener. It was like Scope, Listerine, things like that. Mm-hmm. And, those have a lot of alcohol in, too. Gotcha. But we would advertise them of having... And they did. They were only this big.
Yeah.
They had a lot of alcohol in them. So we'd sell them to our classmates, and it just caught on like wildfire.
That's kind of what I used
as many as they could get in.
That's like what I used to do with like toothpaste or like those little things that you put on your tongue. I knew they had alcohol in it, so you thought you were consuming alcohol.
Yeah.
So then you like develop this complexity. Like you're not allowed to drink alcohol, but they give you alcohol. So for so long, I didn't understand like why at a certain age you can't have alcohol legally. And at a certain age, you can't have it, and then you can have it because it's found in so many different products.
Oh, I'm pretty sure if I did it nowadays, Mom and Dad would get a phone call. But back then it was just so much different.
Yeah, nobody really cared too much. There's also no way to really connect to what your kids are doing.
Correct. That's true.
Right.
That's true.
Because you couldn't see what, like my first viewer on all my Instagram stories is my mom. So you can't like hide anything, and you can't. There's nothing you can hide.
I have a different Instagram with 2.
Like I heard something that you don't have the parents nowadays are like not helicopter parents anymore. They are the type of parents that instead of hovering over the kids before they do something wrong, they try to pave the road for them so they never experience anything that is damaging to them. So like you came from the generation where it wasn't helicopter parents. It was not even gonna like. I'm gonna let them just do what they do. And then I came from not helicopter parents, but at least I grew up around people who did have helicopter parents. And nowadays you see kids who the parents are not. The kids don't notice them. They're not around all the time because the parents are already 2 steps ahead of them. Setting up the class so they don't have to deal with the one kid who's super smart in class. They get them out of the class. They tell the coaches about the kid before the coach has to teach them, so they know, because you don't want to like damage your kids. Like everyone thinks that like a kid has like a certain number of strikes that you get, and once you hit like strike 10, they're done.
What do you think about that?
They're falling off the the edge of the earth. But I had this, like I was telling you last night, Like, it's almost like you need to be able to, I think I was talking about this on last podcast, but in order for you to, like, grow your emotional stability and your ability to, like, take on certain situations, you need to have that wall penetrated more and more. Just like if you want a strong immune system, you need to have a weak immune system. Not all at once, aka cancer, that's not good, but you need to have a weak immune system a lot during a long period of time to get a stronger immune system. But now it's like, I mean, I'm 23, but the kids, they just don't have any. The worst thing I see, it's not that they're weak, is that they don't. There's no strategy to overcome hard situations. You know, because you've never had to develop a strategy. You've also never really had to just fall flat on your face. You know, because it sounds like, at least some stories I've heard, that when you fell flat on your face, there wasn't a parent there to pick you back up. It was like, oh, you're 19. I figured this out, so you can figure it out.
Yeah, it's amazing nowadays, and I think there's so many pros and cons, because it's said probably too often, but there's no real way to raise your kid properly. And some things work for certain kids, and some things don't work for certain kids. And I think, especially with this generation, I hear so many negatives. And I think it's a generational thing where, hell, I'm pretty sure the way I dressed wasn't very appreciated by my parents. Yeah. And they probably didn't appreciate, the way people dressed in the 60s either. So I think that's kind of, I don't know, it's just nature. With that being said, I see a lot in this generation that I really appreciate in so many different ways. But I'm not so sure. You guys have to, in my opinion at least, I'm not a kid, so I don't know it firsthand, but I think that you guys have to be responsible and at such a younger age. Mm-hmm. You really do. You have to make sure, you have to always go into things understanding that it could possibly be the rest of your life. It could be permanently recorded, whatever you do. I mean, I did plenty of stupid things at parties, especially when I was in high school, that I'm so glad it wasn't recorded.
Yeah.
But now you guys have to be accountable for what you do, what you say. You see that all the time where people are having to recount something that they said, I don't know, during a tweet when they were 16, 17 years old. And now they have to try to explain it when they're young men at 22, 23, 24 years old. And personally, I think that's unfair. But it's out there, and it's permanently recorded. And it's got to be tough. It's got to be tough, because the only way, really, honestly, I didn't learn from my successes. I learned from my failures. And I've had so many failures. But if I was lucky enough to learn from them, I grew up as a man. Mm-hmm. There's a lot that goes into becoming mature. With that being said, mature is different than just growing up,
It's not age.
It's not age. And also, I still consider myself a kid. I mean, in so many different ways. Yeah. But you can do both, and you can be happy with yourself. Mm-hmm. But to get there, you got to go through the bumps, the grinds. You got to fall flat on your face. And if your mom and dad are always there to pick you up, it's probably not going to help you grow up.
It's definitely not going to. It's not going to aid you or teach you to. It's. I mean, the worst. I mean, even like, let's say your parents do pass away and you grew up like that. It's like you expect somebody to always be there for you, and then by expecting somebody to always be there for you, every relationship you're ever going to have is going to be unbalanced, because what you want out of the relationship is more than what the other person wants out of the relationship, and what you want is unrealistic, because it's no one's job to always be there for you. It's like parents have like a duty almost. They don't have a duty, but they do it naturally. So I know, like, I have friends of mine who, like Charles, he has that issue. Like he's told me before, he's told it on the podcast. Like he has that issue of just expecting so much out of a relationship. He's, giving, because he never was given as a child. So by the act of him giving, he's expecting something in return that is like appreciative of everything that he gave. But it's unrealistic. It's impossible. And that's what I see a lot with kids nowadays. It's like you just feel this sense of it's about me all the time, because your parents you never had a clear cut line in the sand of the difference between individualism and a group, because you are the group, and if you have everybody who thinks of the group, you have anarchy. So you have these people who live in an anarchy world. And at least from the videos that I saw, like in the 60s and 70s and 80s, like the people who didn't have a voice, they made a voice, but like non-violently. Like people nowadays, when they want a voice, they do it very violently. They act out.
You know, and not to be a revisionist or anything, because I'm not, but in the 60s, it was social upheaval. You know, it was time for burning the bras, civil rights marches. You know, the water cannons, the dogs were brought out. It was incredibly violent. In the early 70s, there was more domestic terrorism than we could even imagine nowadays. There were bombs blasting off all over the place, and everybody had their own little separate movement. Yeah. You know, they were kind of what, you know, we're seeing now, but, you know, they're the ones who made the foothold for, hey, recognize me, see me, I have this belief, and I need attention brought to it at any means possible or necessary, you know? So that's kind of, you know, the grassroots efforts kind of started in the 50s and 60s and, you know, 70s, and it hasn't gone away. But like what you were bringing up with like the helicopter type parents, and nowadays what you're seeing, you know, they prepare their kids for everything. If they're going in for an interview to get into a private school or something like that, they prepare them for the interview, so they already know exactly what to say, what questions to ask. I mean, I can't even imagine going in when I was in 6th grade, going into 7th or something like that, to ask a principal or whoever I'm speaking with, an administrator, actually sit there and be mature enough to ask a question and act like it was a job interview. You know, God bless them. For some people that works, you know. Some of these people probably go on and have these incredible lives. You know, so I brought up with you earlier about how elementary school was kind of like a breeze for me. I guess, you know, kids like me. They always made me, you know, team captain. You got to pick the kickball team. I was a good athlete. I was smart enough to get through. And so that was kind of cool. But then I had to transition, and I had to go into middle school, which for me was just a bloody nightmare.
You and me, the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's like 7th and 8th grade. That's what middle school was. 7th, 8th, and 9th, I guess. Yeah,
I was 6, 7,
we were
8.
late.
Today it was 7, 8, 9. Middle school. Middle school was 7, 8, 9.
That's
Yeah,
what
we were
just said.
7th and 8th, and then eventually we didn't make it into 9th grade into high school. I went into high school first year in 10th grade. With that being said, though, I mean, I fell flat on my face because I was always, ever since I was born, I think, I was always a perfectionist. I always had to be the best at what I did. And so I was always
Exhausted.
analyzing myself. You know, I was, you know, and then all of a sudden, I was the best pitcher, man. I mean, I rolled it out. I pitched every game all the time, county championships, and all of a sudden this other kid came in and he was better than I was. Whoa. That kind of took me back a few steps. I went into classes where I had to make new friends from people with different school districts. So, you know, for 6 years when I was in school, I knew everybody. And, you know, I was buds with most of them. And then I had to meet new people who were cooler than I was, at least the way I was looking at it.
Yeah.
I was incredibly shy, where when you're in an insulated elementary school, like Beltsville Elementary, you know, knowing everybody, you could be shy because people would come to you. But now I had to go into a place where I had to, I don't know, prove myself, step up. Well, I didn't do that. I drew back. So eventually, I just quit going to school. It was kind of crazy, the step back that I took in middle school.
How long did you stop going to school for?
Well, that was the thing is, I'd go to school and then I'd leave.
Yeah.
And back then, it's not like you got an automatic phone call or a notification went out. They'd have to keep, they'd have to keep lists. Once it got to a certain point, then they'd say, hey, he didn't show up for whatever class, period.
Yeah.
You know, and
And even
so,
when you showed up, you shut down.
and I always walked to school. So Martin Luther King was, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 miles away from where I lived. But every day I'd walk to school. So there were a lot of other choices that I could make when I was walking to school.
Yeah.
But I was still smart enough to get through school. Not because I showed up, just because I knew enough to take the test. Hell, it got to a point where literally my parents would try and drop me off in front of the school, and I'd walk right out the back of the school. but that was, I was making bad choices. That's everybody does, but I felt so socially awkward in having to be around big groups. Like I went to this middle school that didn't even have windows. We were just in big pods. So there were 4 classrooms in a pod. So you can imagine how big these pods were. And I was one who grew up loving to walk around in the woods and see nature and do all this stuff. Now all of a sudden I don't even have windows to look out of. So I wasn't a classroom guy to begin with, and now all of a sudden I can't even see the outside.
Yeah.
Except for your PE, phys ed, and recess. Well, yeah, that's right. You didn't even have recess in middle school, so you weren't even getting outside except for half hour, 45 minutes during the day. So it was a nightmare. But I got through that and finally made it into high school. But it was so weird to me. I can honestly say I didn't like myself at the time. I saw other people and I thought they were so cool, and I wanted to be as cool as they were, but that probably wasn't going to happen. So I kind of just curled up into a ball and did what I had to do to get through, but I didn't have any life goals at that point. I was still delivering newspapers at that time. I was still, making money, cutting grass and things like that. And I was always so blessed because for whatever reason, I had a great core of friends. That they weren't there to bail me out of things or try and change who I was, but they were always there, and if I could say anything, man, it's not how many friends you have, but it's how good of friends they are.
Yeah.
That's important. Yeah. If you get anything else out of life, make those friends, make those connections, know that you can trust those people. You can rely on them, and they've come through for me. I like to think I've come through for them, but it's one of the best blessings you can have in life. Good friends.
A few really close people. Yeah, the way you're explaining middle school, you start talking about high school. I'm like, there's no way that you got through high school. How'd you you just you just said, screw this, I hate everything. I'm just gonna walk through hell till I make it out? Or did you start when was the change where you hated school and you hated everything that was going on? You felt yourself fall down the dominance hierarchy at school, and that made you feel insecure about yourself, and and you didn't want to go to school because you felt dumb. What in between that time to getting through that, what was graduation? I know you said your friends, but is that just because they were an outlet for you to just talk to, or was it an event, a near-death experience? Was it somebody who you lost, or was it it's
interesting as you bring that up, because obviously not everybody does interviews, so you don't talk about a lot of this stuff very often, but I in a weird sort of way, partying was my way.
Yeah.
That's the thing that kind of saved me.
Yeah.
Because when I would go to school in high school, I had a lot of friends. I don't know why. It's not like I was reaching out to try to make these friends, but these people would be around me. They wanted to hang out. When I go to a party, the freaks, the jocks, we have different names for them, but the geeks, the nerds, they would all come up to me and for whatever reason, they want to be around me. So as much as I didn't like school, it wasn't one of those things where I went there and I got bullied.
Yeah.
I didn't get bullied. I was lucky. Also had a brother who definitely didn't get bullied. I don't know if that had any influence on it at all. What's kind of funny is in high school, I remember when I first got to high school, I had certain teachers say certain things to me. And I kind of expected that, I guess, but I didn't have a clue what high school was like.
It's because your brother was older than you, right?
Yeah, he was 14 months older than me.
A year.
But he was 2 years in school ahead of me.
2 years in school.
And then ahead of me, was my sister, who was 4 years ahead of me.
Who
now my sister
pretty much had the crown.
Yeah, I mean she was I don't know, maybe
She had her shit together.
homecoming queen, National Honor Society. She played all the different sports, very athletic, and she did well in school. And
how would she? I know I'm sorry to cut you off, but I've always wondered, when I think of when I think of your family, I almost always think of Kathy as the stepchild, and that's not in a rude way. I just have always thought of it as she like separated herself.
She was for
Not like in a intellectual way, but in a way that, like, I know that she's your sister and I know she's my aunt, but it was like she seems like she's 20 years older, because when I hear stories, I never hear Kathy. Like when you have no stories about your sister. At least the one I remember is when Johnny would come over, who's her husband.
You know, they were just that story, reference to the dog chasing him
Mm-hmm.
on their first date, was just on a radio show.
true story. Yeah.
Yeah, they just won a big prize.
Who did?
That story.
It was a contest of some sort.
Yeah, I forget which channel it was, 107.3 or something like that. Johnny called in. It just happened a couple months ago, and he recounted their first date and how Kathy couldn't go on the first date, and all the things that went into it that he never learned until after they started dating. She couldn't even go on the date because she was sick, yet when he got to the house, she wasn't at home. So you can imagine how that story unfolded. But and then the dog chasing him down the street, Robin Hood chasing him down the street, and he barreled out of there with a whole dozen roses and a dog hot on his behind. But yeah, so they just, what the heck did they win? They won a vacation someplace.
Yeah.
It was a
because
paid
he
getaway
told that story.
because he told that story on the radio, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
He sent me the recording of it, so it's pretty neat. Yeah, so no, Kathy was always, so she was the oldest. She had two younger brothers, so Kathy could always hold her own.
See, even the way you just explained that was like not even like family, yes, but like she just like looked at you guys. She's like, okay, you guys are the Brady Bunch. I'm going over here.
Yeah, no, she had to fight for everything she got.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm
You know?
saying.
And she paved the way, obviously. Like, my parents were more stringent on her than David, or obviously me. So she didn't push the boundaries. Like, she followed the rules. Yet she was fearless. I mean, she would do whatever she had to do. It didn't matter who she had to talk to. She would have conferences with the freaking teachers. Who does that? You know, how can I be better? You know, back in the day.
Taylor.
Not too many people do that, but Kathy would do that, and she was always. It just always seemed like she was always bettering herself.
She wasn't self-destructive.
She wasn't self-destructive.
Guys usually are.
Yeah, and then my brother came along. So like I started on that story earlier. So my brother was, I guess we call him the black sheep. Mm-hmm. Everything was a battle to him. Everything. It didn't matter what it was. It had to have controversy. He had to fight it. Everything. It was just amazing. So then when I got to high school, they had a lot of the same teachers. So
Sounds like me.
first thing out of their mouths would be, "Are you like Kathy or are you like David?" I mean, how do you answer that?
Yeah.
How do you properly answer that? You know, because
So that's an identity issue too, right there.
that was an identity
Who
issue.
the hell
yeah.
am I?
Yeah, so I already came in with, hey, who are you? And what are you going to be like? But I can tell you, so I got through high school. I did have a lot of fun in high school, but it wasn't actually in the school part. It was everything extracurricular stuff, outside of school. But I was still developing friendships. But it didn't really lead me to be an adult. It didn't teach me how to be mature.
Yeah.
Like, who comes out of high school and is like super mature? Some people probably think they do, and some people probably are. Some more than others. But then all of a sudden reality hit me. I knew I couldn't be in classrooms anymore. So, college for me wasn't a great option. Like, I went down and took the test to go into PGCC and took the test, and in between that time and going to classes, I got a job doing home improvement. So I was like, I got to pay my rent. I got to get out there, work in the real world. I was blessed because in home improvement, we spent a lot of our time putting roofs on. Now, carrying shingles up a ladder, 2, 3 floors sometimes, stories I should say, not floors. In the sun, in the summer, we did Spring Hill Lake every summer. So it used to be the largest apartment complex on the East Coast, had their own school, shopping center, and everything else. So that's what we do. We go up and nail down 50 square a day in the blazing sun. We try to get help. Like, during the summer months, we try and hire students from University of Maryland. Tops, they last 3 days. One day probably at the most.
You hear that, you snowflakes?
No. I mean, once you got up there and it's 120, 130 degrees up on those roofs, and you learned what hard work really was. And
Not studying. I'm just kidding.
no. For me, studying, just to be disciplined enough to study, hats off to those folks. I just didn't have that ability at the time. But by doing that hard work and having to work 8, 10, 12 hours some days every day, just so you can make your rent and you can pay your bills, that benefited me greatly in that sense.
How was that job? I know you tell me some stories about there's always that one that sticks out to me where you guys are chasing. I try to tell this story to my friends, and it comes off a little crazy.
Yeah.
Like the story about you, and I think someone knocked a ladder off the rooftop, and you guys started shooting each other with guns.
Oh, yeah, that's two different stories mixed into each other. So the guy who I worked with, Daryl Neiman, he's the one who got me the job. He's the guy, I know I told you during the audio interview, but so Daryl Neiman and I met each other in kindergarten. We got in a fight over a Tonka truck or something like that and got sent down to the office. And then we got into another fight while we were waiting for the principal to come out and talk to us. So that was Daryl, and to this day, he's still my best bud. Shout outs to Daryl and DC Fire Department. So he got me that job doing home improvements. So it was he and I usually working together with a carpenter. Well, then Daryl and I took over the roofing crew, and so we had a couple of assistants, and both these guys were I don't know,
Mentally handicapped.
yeah.
TikTok.
I don't know how to say it nowadays, but
The brains were lacking.
they were great guys, but they just saw things differently than we did. But so we used to do this thing during lunch, try to find some shade. But then we had these pneumatic nailers where you could just pull back the nail part of it, and you
Don't
could just
tell me you started shooting a Down syndrome kid.
Okay, well, I mean, well, like I said, it's hard to be appropriate. I mean, we had fun times.
It is what
and
it is.
everybody got to shoot the gun, so it's not like we were just picking on certain people. It's just
So they got their fair share.
Yes.
they would have, except Woody shot one. The very first nail he shot at us went right
was
through his
Woody?
finger.
Woody was
So-
the gentleman who was the alcoholic, right?
No. Woody
was
was
autistic.
kicked. Woody was kicked out of his house at 9 years old. Because he was a slow learner and he had a lot of issues, and his dad was abusive. So basically, he got kicked on the streets. He came up through foster homes. So when I knew Woody, he was about 40 years old, and he lived in a group home, and he would take the bus every day to the shop down in College Park, and that was my bud. We worked just about every job together. Woody was with me, and so we got to be real tight. But there are a lot of stories that I've told you involved Woody.
You want to share any?
Literally, I can't share because then I'm gonna offend somebody or some.
I've already offended Down syndrome kids, autism kids. I've offended everybody here.
Well,
They're not offended. If you're not making them up.
no.
They're true.
So anyhow, so what we do is
hilarious.
we played a game called Jailbreak.
Yeah.
And so what it essentially was one of us would man the pneumatic nail roofing gun, and we'd pull back the safety lever, and then you could shoot it like an automatic weapon, right? But you had, I don't know, it was like, you'd yell jailbreak, and everybody would take off running except the person operating the nail gun. And it was Spring Hill Lake apartments. So these things were 50 to 100 yards long, so you had plenty of room to run. And you get a count till...
You're on the roof?
Yeah, up on the roof, yeah. And so it was like 8 to 10, I think they count to 8 or something like that. And you could start shooting. So then Woody one day said, "Hey, man, I got an idea." "What?" He goes, "How about you and Darryl run? Why don't you and Darryl run, and we'll shoot at you?" And now Woody had used the gun before. He knew how to put down shingles. We went over with him again, man. And all of a sudden, he yelled jailbreak, and we started running, and all of a sudden we hear this, "Ow! I shot my finger. I shot my finger." He's jumping up and down, dropped the nail gun, and we turn around, and, we look back like, what just happened? Man, Woody shot that nail right through his finger, man. And now he had to explain to the boss how, why Woody needed leave to get stitches in his finger and get his finger repaired. But, when I tell the other story, it's a little bit more animated. But there were things like that happened all the time, and it went both ways. Like I remember one time, Woody was just like he just kept on talking and talking and talking. I was trying to concentrate. We were doing a kitchen. I was trying to get the measurements right, and he just kept on talking. So I said, "Hey, Woody, do me a favor, going out to the van and just get the wood stretcher, okay? Get the board stretcher." And Woody loved to smoke. Like Woody was a chain smoker. Mm-hmm. So any opportunity he got, like to pick up trash, he'd pick up like, I don't know, one shingle wrapper and just start smoking. And then he wouldn't see Woody. Well, it was like 2 hours into it. Now I needed some stuff, and I went on out to find Woody, and he's just out there sitting on the little side of the van. I was like, Woody, what are you doing, man? He goes, I'm smoking, Rob. I was like, well, I see that, Woody. I was like, why didn't you come back in? He goes, I'm still looking for the board stretcher. So Woody done figured out that I was just putting him on, but he took advantage of the opportunity and probably smoked, I don't know, 2 packs of cigarettes in the meantime. Jesus. But now, just real quick, one other story, which is kind of funny. Ray DeFeo was our other helper, and one day we were just up the roof and trying to get through the heat, and I said something like, "Hey, man, did you hear we're going to be sending a spaceship up to the sun?" And Ray said, "You can't send a spaceship to the sun; it'll melt." And I looked at him, and I was like, "We're doing it at night." And Woody goes, "Yeah, dumbass, we're doing it at night." So we just had a lot of good conversations while we were working, so it got us through that.
Yeah, I definitely experienced that a lot at the restaurant with the owner's son who had Down syndrome. There was a lot of times where he'd come up to us and just keep on talking. And you're making I remember one time I was managing, and it was the middle of Friday night, and our dishwasher left, and his name was Adam, and he just kept on coming up to me, and it was one of my first shifts ever, managing by myself, and he's asking me how do you he's like what is she? Mom.
You want me to?
Mom.
Becky. Yeah, no. We hear everything.
Can you go outside or something? Or turn the speaker off, please? God, sorry about that. Yeah, anyways, so it was super late, it was six, not late, but it was super busy. It was 6:30, and he just kept on coming up, and he just kept on talking and talking and talking. I was like, Adam, please, can you just go do something? So then he goes into the dish room, and I see him in there. I'm like, hey man, do you just mind cleaning some dishes? So he starts cleaning dishes, and by the time I get down there at 9:00, he's on he's on his back with his legs and hands up cleaning the dishwashing machine while the dishes are stacking to the top of where the cups were. And it's about yay high of just dishes flat across. So there's things like that. I always wanted him to do something for me, but then when I asked him to do something, he would make the situation worse. But I will say, if the health inspector came in that day, we would have had our dishwasher would have got passed.
The dishwasher, sure.
Yeah, the dishwasher. But then they would ask us, is this guy even employed? We said wasn't employed, and then we'd probably get in trouble for that. Yeah, is there anything else you wanted to cover on here? I have, you have, I guess, you put down some of your athletes, your favorite athletes.
Oh, yeah, you know what I put down was some of my man crushes.
Yeah,
I don't even know
know
if that's a term anymore.
It is.
Yes,
So many you have a crush on.
Well, so Terry Redlin, he's an artist.
Yeah.
He's dead now.
I grew up with him.
Yeah.
Because of you.
Love me some Terry Redlin, man.
He's the guy that every time you go into your grandfather's house or every uncle house that you know who's white and about 6 feet tall, and they love Gentleman's Jack or Scotch, there's a duck flying over the pond with a nice off shade of red, brown tint with a Chevy.
Americana, yeah.
You told me that there's a Chevy or there's a truck. There's a dog in a truck.
There's a dog, yeah, and all of his he has wildlife art, and then if there's humans in his art, there's a dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites. I've read a lot about him, how he came to be. He's an amazing story. So he had a scholarship, an athletic scholarship to go to college.
Yeah.
Grew up on a farm, I guess it was in South Dakota, and had a terrible motorcycle accident. And he was going to go to the University of Minnesota. And so he lost a leg. And so University of Minnesota decided to go ahead and honor his contract or his scholarship, and they allowed him to go to school. And he also loved art. And so his studies in school was to become a graphic artist. And so that's what he did. He was, successful. He worked, I guess he was about 30 years into it when MR Ducks, I think it was, or Ducks Unlimited, one or the other had a contest where people could enter their own art. And his wife took his art that he was doing on the side and actually entered it into this contest. And they made him the winner and offered him a contract. And the rest is history. I think he's the most sold American artist ever.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
He's a neat story.
He's in every single house.
Yeah.
There's not many artists. He's probably the only artist of the past 200 years where his art is, it's in every... The only art that you see that's more, which is not even art, is like those stupid office pictures that say like perseverance or like determination with like a picture of a mountain. Mm-hmm. That's not even art, though. That's just photography.
With cool quotes. No, he wasn't the artist of light, but he was the guy who came up with the idea of light. But to put that in the but I think a lot of people identify with that. A simpler time in America.
Yeah. Which is still here. You can go out to
it is
Kansas right now.
It is.
Hang out down there.
Once again, I think that's why so many people identified with his artwork.
That's why I think Trump won too.
And
people want that.
Well, and people, they love nature.
People
love
nature.
Animals. And he could capture those.
Yeah.
Incredibly well. Geese, ducks, deer. He was just so good at doing that.
Like I was telling you, like the past 2 weeks, Taylor and I have been hiking. We'll probably go again this week, unless we have too much studying. Like we were talking about it again a couple of nights ago. Like there's just something about being out, like in the nature, like along the mountainside, or out like fishing, which you and I love to do. Like I've thought about that so many times. Like when you catch a fish, and you're reeling it in, you really got to think about it because you don't even think about it. Like when you're reeling in a big fish, everything else is gone. Mm-hmm. Like you don't even see anything around. It's just you and the fish.
Yeah.
It's like it's like something kicks on in your brain where you go into like this primitive mind state where you catch this fish, you can feel it. Like there's nothing that gives you that rush where you just totally focus and totally zone in.
Yeah.
And that's what I think and that's why artists like that are so talented because you can capture nature, and that's why people live on the ocean. That's why people love conquering a freaking mountain on stupid plastic skis. Because you're conquering the one thing that can kill you without you even like a hurricane will kill you. There's nothing you can do about it. You can defend yourself from somebody else killing you, but nature is like this one thing that we can all just master. Like surfers are the perfect example. They get up on this wave that this thing will kill everything unless you're made for the water, and you conquer that. And it's like when people say these people are crazy, it's like. No, they're not. Yes, they're crazy, but they have the accomplishment. The same way that like,
oh yeah,
like being a cop.
Well, yeah, being a cop. And then you have that thrill seeker mentality out there. Human beings love challenges. I think we have to have a challenge. I think it's part of our genetic makeup. We want to be able to wake up, go do something, make yourself productive, believe in what you're doing, and you know what? You get some sort of pride out of that. It makes you feel good. Mm-hmm. It gives you a reason, just another reason, but a reason to wake up every day and go do something, to try to accomplish something. I was watching something a while back, and these guys literally put on wing outfits and jump off a cliff, and they fly at like 150 miles per hour, eventually landing, with a parachute. But regardless, they're flying through the air down the side of a mountain with wings on. It's amazing to me.
I've never heard an interview of someone who said I used to wing dive. That's what's scary about, and that's why
those accidents,
because you don't used to, you don't retire from
when
sky.
Is enough ever enough?
Exactly, and these like that God, we gotta watch a documentary, when the guy scales the mountain. The dude who did it's called Solo, I think.
Is that the guy without the ribs?
Yeah, he was on Joe Rogan's podcast.
Didn't he die?
No, he's still alive.
Is he still alive? He's amazing.
Alive.
They did a thing on 60 Minutes years ago about him.
It might have been a different dude.
It might have been.
But this is the guy who he climbed this face of the mountain all by himself for the first time, or he did it for the first time with no ropes or anything. But you look at these people, and it's always been an argument between scientists. Is their brain just not lacking? It's just because they have an underactive amygdala, which is the part of your brain that is overly active, means you're very anxious all the time. They have like no, like you put it on the fMRI, there would be no, if you show them a picture of a snake where everybody goes like this, they just go like this. And scientists have always like been pondering, like, is that because of genetics and nature, or is that because nurture? You know, it's kind of always been a thing. But that's why sports are so good. And that's why, honestly, like, you know, as much as people say, you know, it's really interesting. I've been thinking about this football thing, like this concussion thing. I don't know too much about sex differences, but I don't remember really hearing a dad agreeing with the argument that I won't let my son play football. It's usually the mom. Usually the mom's the one saying, I don't want my kid to get a concussion. And you never really hear from the dad, because there's something about dudes getting out there and just, it doesn't matter. It could be through football, it could be through UFC, it could be through math solving. There's something about accomplishing that I think every dude needs to get out somehow, or you see what happens if it doesn't. It's like this built up aggression against the world.
Yep.
You know, that's why you said partying. But you don't have an addictive mentality. Thank God. You have an obsessive mentality, so you can decide when enough is enough. Addicted people, they don't do that. But it's like dudes, like they need to do that. I mean, females do the same thing, but a female gets punched in the head a few times, most of them would be like, I don't like this. A dude would be like, I've got punched in the head 10 times, what's 10 more times going to do? You know, and that's why you see like these surfers like Kelly Slater, they don't, extreme sports athletes, you never get they don't have a Hall of Fame speech. You don't see a Hall of Fame for extreme athletes because they don't survive. They die.
Well, yeah, because the more extreme it is, the more attention they get.
Yeah, there's no finish line either.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I watch what they do, and I'm like, so what's next? You know, I mean, I can't even, on a set of skis, and you're just flying in the air, wait until you hit hard rock with a little bit of snow on top of it. I don't know, man. I mean, that's fearless or stupid or a combination of the two. Sometimes it's a thin line. But
it's lacking. I don't get jealous. I don't look at it and be like, I want to do that, because I don't have any need to. But I know if I did do it, I wouldn't stop doing it.
Probably, and you gotta. Sometimes you gotta look at the big picture. You know, you might want to be able to use your body when you're 40 years old.
Yeah.
You know. Now I have recently, heard where some athletes, some football players and stuff had said, you know what, I'm going to steer my kid towards baseball, basketball, things like that, just because of those injuries. I recently had a friend who was at a Chiefs conference, Chief Police conference, and came back, and one of the questions at the conference by the presenter was, how many of you, by show of hands, would steer your son or daughter to police work? And less than 30% of the hands went up. You know, I think that kind of explains kind of the environment, the atmosphere that we're living in right now with the way police officers are looked at.
Yeah.
And then, that's something else I was just going to touch on was, so I was doing home improvement, and the owner of the company became addicted to crack cocaine, and we were going belly up. So I asked everybody in my family if they wouldn't mind just start, back in the day, you didn't fill out applications online, so they just started bringing home applications, and I just filled out a whole bunch. I was lucky I didn't have college, but I was able to get my foot in the door at a small police department. It was a state-run agency, and then I was able to unfold a career of 25 years of police work, which was the most fulfilling career that I could have ever dreamed of. It's nothing that I ever wanted to be. I was kind of forced into that because I had to, once again, keep on paying my rent. But it was the most fulfilling job I think I could have ever had. In police work, you get more opportunities to help people than probably almost any other profession there is. And during that time, I figured out that one of the things that are most enjoyable to me would be to help people. Help people broke down on the side of the road. Help people who've been the victim of a crime. Help families who've lost a loved one to homicide or whatever it might be. I had so many fulfilling moments doing that as a police officer. I think it's a shame, the way the society, I don't want to blanket it, that the way that police officers are treated, particularly in some jurisdictions. Because ultimately, if you ask an officer, 5-10% of whatever group, whatever profession there is, they're not going to be that great. I was blessed because I worked with so many incredible police officers, men and women. And ultimately, that's what it sounds so simple, but the reason why they got that job is because they did want to help people.
Yeah.
So you're taking a segment of society who they're not looking to become millionaires because they're not going to. They're not looking so much to be heroes because eventually the job beats you down. You realize you're not going to be that superstar, but they keep on doing the job. And it's really ultimately, I think, it's because they're incredibly good people. And I just wish more people would understand they're not the boogeymen that show up to be mean to people. They're just not. They're just not. Any segment of society, they need a police officer one time or another. And even the worst of the worst, hell, they call the police. But the police have to come out and they have to make a decision. They have to do something. And ultimately, putting someone in handcuffs is the ultimate, most powerful thing you can do in this country, is to take somebody's liberty away. And little kids are watching. Family members are watching. They might have been pummeling each other 5 minutes before the cops showed up. The cops have to do something, and now all of a sudden they're all fighting the cops because, that's who they don't like. But I just want to throw a shout out because I do appreciate the brother and sisterhood, and they do a great job. And if we didn't have them, could you imagine society?
Yeah. It would be a lot less
You mentioned anarchy earlier.
dumb people.
Yeah.
They would, you also, correct me if I'm wrong, just because you get cuffs thrown on you doesn't mean you're arrested.
Well, that's a really good question.
Because
and that's something.
You're guilty. I mean, you could go, technically freedom is taken away because
Your
you
freedom
have
to leave, at that point, you are detained.
Yeah,
But
so
if there's an active investigation, and that's something that if you get a really, really good lawyer, they're probably going to be able to swerve a jury the way they want you to think.
Yeah.
It matters how good they are doing what they do. But technically, if you're investigating an investigation, you have the right to detain an individual. If the use of handcuffs are necessary for officer safety at that point, you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not under arrest. It's kind of like the same as
So
everybody
when
says, if you're going to arrest someone, you need to read them the Miranda rights. That's not technically true. You can arrest someone and never read them the Miranda rights. It's only if you have probable cause to believe that they committed an action that's against the law, and then you start asking them accusatory questions. Then they need to know the right to their attorney.
So you could hypothetically, if you see someone beat the hell out of a woman,
Mm-hmm.
you can grab them, arrest them, and not until you say something about we caught that on camera, or where they might start saying anything that might affect the legality of it.
Yeah.
That's when you have to.
Exactly. Once you have enough probable cause to arrest someone, obviously, if something like that happens in front of you, you do have that probable cause. So you can place them into custody. If they want to continue talking about it and they're actually, violating their own Fifth Amendment, where they against self-incrimination, you break in and you just basically tell them what their rights are. You read them the Miranda rights.
Yeah.
If they want to continue to talk, that's fine. Because nowadays, even more so, because nowadays everything's recorded. Body cams are out there. People are recording on their phones, everything that takes place. So a lot of that stuff really can't be held against them unless you have advised them their rights.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's just something that that'll be argued until we're no longer around. I mean, that's one of the main arguments. At what point did you put them in custody?
Have you ever dealt with a citizen arrest? Like, have you ever dealt with like showing up to a scene where somebody has made a citizen arrest? Because you can do that, right? Can I can make an arrest.
So, yes. So, a citizen sees something like you just gave an example. Say it's a purse snatching from a 90-year-old lady trying to use an ATM.
Mm-hmm.
They're dragging her, trying to get her purse away from her. She's suffering bad injuries. They kick her a couple times. Citizens can go and hold the person, do whatever they need to stop the danger, the threat, make the scene safe as they possibly can, and then wait for police to arrive. So in that way, it's a citizen arrest. They've held that person in custody. You get their information. You put them into custody.
Do they have to show up to court now?
Pardon me?
Does the person who made the citizen arrest have to? Do they have to go through the trial and everything?
Yeah, because they're the witness to
man.
the incident. So they're going to be your star witnesses. They're going to be the one who comes and explains exactly what they saw. Now, on the other hand, say a fight takes place, two 18-year-old guys decide to get into a fight. Police get called. They show up. There's not catastrophic injuries. They just beat each other up. Officer didn't witness the incident. It's not captured on video or anything else. So an officer oftentimes will probably just write a report and advise them what their rights are. If they want to go down and get charges on the other person, they can do that. They just go to a commissioner's office.
Yeah. It's like a just in case thing.
Yeah, you just fill out an application or statement of charges, writing down your probable cause, you turn it back into the commissioner. The commissioner can either issue a warrant, they can issue a summons, or they can just say there's not enough here to charge anybody. Yeah. So in that way, it's kind of a citizen arrest, because now if there is a warrant issued, that person will need to be taken into custody to be able to satisfy the warrant, so they'll be taken back in front of a commissioner and possibly have a bail review on them in order to be able to get out of jail. But so in that sense, citizens have so many rights in this country.
Yeah.
Not just civilly, but also criminally. They can make a lot of things happen. Now, if it rises to the level of felony, particularly violent felonies, sexual assaults, robberies, homicides, things like that, attempted, then obviously the police department has to conduct an investigation. So they're notified. They conduct the investigation. They're the ones who apply for the charges. But once again, there's a screening process where the officer, the witnesses, will all be screened by the state attorney's office before it ever even goes to court. So they know what type of case they have. So they know what avenue they're going to follow for prosecution. It's just what you're supposed to do. If you do your job well, 9 times out of 10, you're going to have successful results if you do your job well. And that's something like, so my favorite part of being a police officer was I spent about 10 years as an investigator, and that's where I got the most of my fulfillment. I spent a lot of years as a patrol officer too, and I loved that time. I did a lot of different things in the police department. I was lucky. I was blessed. But in investigations, I loved being able to put one and one together. And, those are the people really that you can affect and help out, the ones who have suffered sexual assaults, rapes, robberies. I did gang investigations for years. So when you do your due diligence, when you conduct a thorough investigation, when you do the best you possibly can, and then you go and you get 40 or 50 years on an individual, or we even got 3 life sentences on one person, and it's not anything to do with bragging. It's just that you feel like when you go in front of a jury and you have a 3, 4, 5 day trial, and they've looked through everything that you've done, and they find enough to find this person guilty beyond a reasonable doubt and put into jail, and the victim sitting there watching, from the gallery, and this is a person you spent a lot of time with. Mm-hmm. You've probably transported them to and from court for every time they had to go to court, and they've done the hardest thing in their lives, not only just being the victim of the crime, but now they have to come back and relive it every time they have to go to court. And so when you can represent and you can do something like that, now the tough part about that is that, and you saw the other end of it too, is where do you stop? Yeah. Because you're sitting there with 30, 40 cases on your desk, and you're trying to do the best you possibly can for all these people. What does that do? That takes away time from the family. Even when you are with your family, you're still thinking in the back of your mind, when I go back to work, this is what I need to do. I need to talk to this person, need to go out, collect this, need to submit this. You're constantly thinking, and you can literally, and that's why at least at one time, I think it's gotten a lot better, but like police officers had ridiculous divorce rates. It was a time when I first started getting into police work. They told us in the academy that, I forget exactly what the stats were, but if you got married while you were a cop, you had about a 75% likelihood that you were going to get divorced. Mm-hmm. And if you were married already and then became a cop, it even got worse.
Game over.
Yeah, game over. I mean, the percentages went way up. And then that's one of the reasons why, because you end up kind of just, especially nowadays, you can imagine, if you go to a party, like with me, like I went to a party, especially with Becky, because now my wife's a cop also,
That made it easier, right?
No, well, it's kind of worse because everybody wants to tell you their experience with a police officer. Everybody has experiences with police officers, but they want to either come up to you and tell you their experience and how they were done wrong, what should have happened, or they got a ticket, what should they do? So kind of the whole party would be people coming on up and asking you questions about your job.
I get the same thing, too. If people know that you guys are cops, Jen gets the same thing.
Yeah.
People love it. I'm like, I'm not a cop, bro. What are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, it can take away, so in other words, what you do is basically you shut down into a little cocoon, and that was me. I mean, for a long time, I was kind of antisocial. I didn't want to go out there and put myself out there. I had a few very select friends that I'd hang out with.
Who were also cops or
cops, yeah, and they shared,
firefighters.
yeah, exactly. So when you would go out, those are the people you'd hang out with. Back in the day, that's all they'd do. They'd go out and hang out with each other. They'd spend, they'd work evening shift and then spend up until 7 o'clock in the morning drinking, playing pool, and all that stuff. I was lucky enough. I kind of came after that generation, and we didn't do that as much. And I was always blessed because I was married to a cop, so I kind of had my own counselor because we didn't get counseling. I should say,
God, that's brutal.
Yeah, which is the wrong way to do it.
Yeah.
You just shut down. You sucked it up. You stuffed it down. You hope it didn't barf back up. But I was lucky though because just because I could always talk to Becky about it and she could talk to me about it. So we were very blessed with that. But you got the effects from it. Jennifer got the effects from it.
Yeah, but being a cop, like the son of a cop, wasn't like the son of a cop. I looked at it as like if you were like an accountant. Like I didn't think of it as anything like you did, but like to me, because I always tell people like people know us in this neighborhood as the family with the cop cars. Mm-hmm. But like to me, it would be like if you had a Mercedes Benz and you were a banker. Like I didn't notice it. Like the police uniform that you and mom would come home with, and I would be with my friends. They'd be like this. That was like their dad coming home with a suit, like a business suit on.
Yeah, because
that's
all you
actually
ever knew,
weirder
really.
now when I see you come home with a business suit, like with the job now, and when you were a detective. That was weirder for me. I was like, this is because I am not that in the future. You wouldn't be that if you didn't have to, but yeah, like and people always ask me like, oh, you're going to be a cop? I was like, what did your dad do? They tell me, I'm like, do you do that?
Yeah.
Like, no, why would I want to, plus if I want to be a cop, I would have not in this generation. Yeah. Also, I would want to be like an FBI agent so I can get away with more things. Because I don't want to have to deal with all the stupid nonsense. Because if you're federal, you can do whatever you want. Kind of. Because then you got the big guy to talk to.
Well, right now they got the old spying glass on them too. Yeah, they got the microscope on them also. But
we're about an hour and 10 minutes into it. Did you want to cover anything else?
You know what I did actually write up the little thing that I gave to you. Let me think.
We got through a lot. We got through man crushes, some athletes. Growing
isn't that
up.
weird that I had to bring up man crushes? You know what though? I didn't actually cover them all. So my man crush for the athletes, Brett Favre. He's my guy. Ken Burns, documentarist. I mean, he's probably one of my all-time favorite Americans ever.
He's rebranding himself too. He's really cool to the young crowd too because he keeps it up with the documentaries.
Yeah, I think he's, quite honestly, I remember when I first started watching, the Dust Bowl and Civil War, all these different things that he had done. I used to think that if they would have brought his documentaries into my classes for history and things like that,
you would have learned more.
I would have learned so much more. He's doing one this Sunday on country music. So I want to catch it. I think that would be very interesting.
Like school nowadays, especially in history, it's like such nonsense. Like you're brought up that you're taught such a positive viewpoint. like when they just glance over the Native Americans, I'm like that we were basically like Nazi Germany.
Oh yeah.
But it doesn't come off like that. We were like pilgrims, turkeys. It's like no. We raped them out of existence.
Definitely. I mean, we literally had a right to just go ahead and take over all their lands and put them into little areas. And
we did that with the Japanese people, too.
Yeah, but those are internment camps. It wasn't good. It was bad.
Yeah.
But with the Indian population, it was completely different.
We just got to be honest with, like, our history. You can't be, like... And that's... I think so many people just aren't honest with it. Like, there's a lot of good, yes, but there's also a lot of bad too, and it's like,
and any country you go to in the world is going to have really bad history, and you just got to accept that.
Yeah, but it's people just don't accept it. That's what it's weird.
Yeah, but then you're right. They don't accept it, and then they try to go back and just erase it all.
Yeah.
What's that doing for our future generations? Talking about not knowing your history, and then you're bound to repeat it. I know that's said a lot, but I think it's so true.
That's why I love this book right here, Sapiens. Yuval Noah Harari is a historian, so he talks about the history. These are all science books. That one he talks about the history, and I gave that book to your brother, and he loved it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
and he has another book by him. But that book's cool because it talks about everything that we are currently doing in this climate. He brings up 4 or 5 examples. It's really neat. It's a really good book.
Oh, that's another one. I am proud to say one of the list on the things that I want to do is read more books, and I am actually starting to do that. So that's a good thing.
We got a few good ones.
Oh no, we have so many that I'm already way in the hole, but at least I'm trying to. Well, at least I'm starting to knock them out. Yeah. Then Abraham Lincoln, probably my favorite American politician.
that,
I'm not big on politicians,
Did you ever
but
see that movie? Oh, all your favorite politicians are not politicians. Abraham Lincoln was not a politician. You know, he was just a dude who got things done.
yeah. By nature he was a lawyer, but
Which is but like the politicians nowadays are actual politicians. Like Abraham Lincoln didn't care if you didn't like him. Now it's like,
oh yeah,
and
you know what's so funny nowadays? You know, with the media, you know, it's just all out there instantaneously.
Oh yeah.
But I tell you what, back then they didn't pull punches either. It just took longer for that stuff to get out there. They were brutal. They were brutal to each other.
Or you can do what Trump does and just, if you push so much, it just becomes white noise.
Sure.
And that's why he's a genius. Like, he says the most outrageous things 24 hours a day. So when he says something that is outrageous, it's downplayed. Then you have somebody else, like the Harris chick who said she was Native American, but she had no Native American in her.
Oh, yeah, that was Elizabeth. Yeah.
Elizabeth Warren. But if she said a lot of wrong things for a long time, nobody would have cared. So it's almost like the best thing to do is just act as crazy as you can. So when you do say something wrong, people are like, yeah, you said it before.
You know, and I think that, you know, that's kind of somebody taking advantage of the tools in their toolbox. I know when McCain ran for president, John McCain from Arizona, they said that he didn't connect with the younger generation. President Obama did connect with the younger generation, and he did that in a multitude of ways. He was smart enough to put people around him who did connect with the younger generation. That's what got him into office, I think.
And Facebook.
And then all of a sudden you get this guy who, you know, President Trump, who figured out how he could just tweet things out. So it wasn't open to interpretation of what he was saying. So it wasn't something that he had said during an interview and then other people get to, it's right there in black and white. And the world you live in, I mean, you know stuff way before I do, oftentimes, on what's happening, where it's happening, how many people are dead, you know, all that stuff. And that's the advantage that, you know, he took advantage of that.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a tool, and he was able to connect with anybody who's paying attention.
Also,
and I think a lot of people are upset about that.
Like in the politician world, there's no such thing as bad publicity. So he knew that the more you said Donald Trump, even though some people would hate you, some people who are on the fringe would be like, I feel that way too, but I've just never been able to say it.
Sure.
So
well, I think that happens so much.
Yeah.
You know, I think, well, it's like you and I tonight at dinner when we were out eating, and we were talking about the world of comedy.
Yeah.
And so many people think stuff, but they're afraid to say it. But comedians get up there, and that's their livelihood, that's their job, that's what they get paid for, and they kind of shock people.
That's why
They shock them into laughter and then people think about it later, and they're like, you know, I've kind of thought that for a long time. I'm afraid to say it. You know, I think we live in an environment nowadays where, I mean, I know I don't talk religion, politics, unless I'm around certain people that I know won't be offended, because that's the world you live in. I mean, I grew up in a different one. Yeah. I can remember growing up in the Boys and Girls Club. It was amazing what these men, these dads, these coaches would talk about. Mm-hmm. Like, wow.
Yeah.
But that's the way dudes used to do things. You know, we'd have parties, football parties, where all the parents would come on over. And I still remember that because we weren't so much heard. We were doing our own thing. You know, we were to be seen. We weren't so much to be heard. We didn't have some right where if I decided to start saying something that somebody's going to pay attention to you. Mm-hmm. You know, they were talking their stuff. Hell, I'm not even kidding. After my dad didn't participate in this, but I used to, when I first started playing football, I had this coach, and he was a Marine veteran of Vietnam. And he was a tough SOB. Like, we couldn't play football that great, but, man, we could just run all day and all night. He would put us in the back of his El Camino, which is like a car with a bed like a pickup truck. And we'd sit in the back of that thing and drive, I don't know, Lewisdale, Langley Park, Bladensburg, all over Prince George's County in the back of that thing going down the freaking Beltway. Mm-hmm. I mean, literally. The sides of it were half the size of a pickup truck. Then we'd return for our parents to pick us up, not at a ball field, at Phil's Bar and Grill in Beltsville.
You drove to the bar?
Drove to the bar because that's where my coach was going to spend the rest of the afternoon, telling stories about how bad football we played. But, it was just a different day of time. Can you imagine seeing, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, however many of us football players, carrying our pads and stuff, sitting in the back of an El Camino car, driving down the Beltway to get to a game. You're not even allowed to put your dog in the back of a pickup truck nowadays.
Not here, but if you go to West Virginia.
Sure.
It still exists.
Yeah, I'm sure it exists. Yeah, absolutely.
My manager, James, he grew up in West Virginia. He's had some stories.
Mm-hmm.
And this is most of the country is still like that, like by land mass, but like by population, it's definitely cut down.
Yeah.
But like Dr. Jordan Peterson has a really good quote that I love. And it's in order to have freedom of speech, you have to be willing to offend people. And because it's true. Like if you want to actually have freedom of speech, if you actually want to be able to say what you need to say, you have to not worry about offending people, but you got to know how to back up what you say and when to apologize. And it's always been strange to me how much we are told and how much they promote. It's okay to make mistakes, but it's really not. It's okay if you're young, but if you make a mistake when you have any sort of power or if you're over the age of 30, Yeah. So it's like, and this generation, the ones that are getting, like the 30 to 40-year-olds, was about the same. Like their parents were about the generation saying it's okay to make mistakes, where your dad was, it was okay, but don't do it. So it's like we all, like, I know for me, like I was told it was okay to make a mistake, but you miss one homework assignment, it's not okay. So it's kind of strange. There's a difference between like having responsibilities and doing them, but also make an honest mistake, and there's no definitive line between those. They kind of blur into each other, and you can't make a mistake because although you're allowed to, you get pummeled before you can actually, like Josh Hader. I played baseball with him. He's a public star, so I can say his name, and he had a few tweets back in high school, and after his All-Star game, the greatest day of his life, he gets off the mound, goes in the locker room, and since he was on the mound during the All-Star game, people will look him up on social media. And, somebody kept on scrolling down on Twitter, saw it. By the time he started the game, he was not even a household name. He was only known in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, maybe. And then by the time he got to his locker and picked up his phone, he was trending. There was 30,000 tweets about him on Twitter. So, like, you are allowed to make mistakes, but if you make mistakes while you have any sort of capability to be famous, the rules are different. Mm-hmm. Also, for like an athlete, it's weird because an athlete's like, you never went into it wanting to be famous. You were just a really good athlete. But if you're like an actor, you kind of, this part of you that's like, no, I want to be famous. Like I want to be on the TV screen. But sometimes for these athletes, it's not about that, So it can be, the rules bend, and it's strange, and that's why I think the issues arise. Is like some people can say something that's wrong because they're not famous, but don't become famous because then the game's over. Because Trump doesn't just represent himself; he represents what a lot of people think is wrong with the country. Mm-hmm. Same thing with like Josh Hader; they think this is what's wrong with that part of the country. Or look at this guy, white guy, tall, long hair, successful. He is the figure of white suppression for every other part of the world, every part of the country.
Yeah, and that was such an injustice what they did to him. And that's one of the things I was saying about this generation. You guys have to be so accountable for everything that you do, and that's every aspect in your life. We didn't have that technology. We did stupid things. And I think he was like 16, 17 or something like that when he tweeted those. He offended people.
We don't take accountability for it, and we resent people. But that's not allowed. But that's also, to me, that's a logical. I'm young, so for me, if you make a mistake, yeah, okay, you're supposed to take accountability for it. But if someone brought up a tweet that I said when I was 15, I'm not taking accountability. I'm saying, yeah, I said that. You said it too.
Well, I get over. Josh Hader's done a great job.
Yeah,
I mean he hasn't run away from it.
No,
but man, can you imagine?
Yeah,
the worst thing maybe that you've written in your life being brought up during a Major League Baseball All-Star game?
Oh yeah.
I mean that's way out of left field, and that's just wrong.
Yeah,
It's just wrong. And I think that happens so much. It matters what you say and who you offend nowadays. And you're right. I think it's important to be able to, with the freedom of speech, one of the greatest rights, if not the greatest right that you can possibly have, and you have to cherish it, and you have to be able to say certain things. You have to be able to speak and say things. You can't just, I don't know, it just seems like what you just mentioned about trolling down and now all of a sudden 30,000. It's these trolls. These people are out there just waiting for something that they can jump on.
Yeah.
And once you're in that spotlight, it's not pulling off, because we Americans, we love to build you up, and then we are going to bring you down. We're going to trash you up.
Yeah.
It's what we do as a society. You know?
We do get bored though. So if like your name's out of the news for a while, you can get back up. That's why like nowadays no one apologizes for anything. You can't apologize because your apology is never going to be good enough. So what you do is you just don't say anything. You wait a few years, then you get a little minor acting role, and then you might go start touring again, and then you eventually build yourself back up. Yeah. We have ADHD as a society. I mean, the whole, and we're always looking for people to go after. It's just everyone's at a different. Everyone's always like everyone are always at like it's always been the same thing though. Like I've always wondered about rock stars. Why there's not been one rock star who's been Me Too'd. Like that's insane. They were definitely the ones probably fulfilling most of these Me Too movements.
Yeah, I'm getting what you're saying, because I never really thought about it like that. But you also had, your
gods.
groupies too.
Yeah.
And these girls weren't just with one rock star. A lot of them have written books.
Yeah.
But they don't make themselves out to be the victim.
Yeah.
They talk about the life and times they had.
Yeah.
Where these other people will say, they went in, it was a casting couch. They went in for an interview, and then all of a sudden, boom, it went south.
Yeah.
And then, sometimes you do have serial people like that in any industry. There are just real jerks who use their power to their advantage, and they're creeps. Yeah. They're criminals. And that's going to happen. But yeah, Rockstar, that's interesting you say that, because, that's kind of how they build their legend. My man crush Rockstar, Bob Seger. Just saw him, 74 years old.
Yeah.
Saw him in concert, man. Last time I were ever going to see him. He totally rocked it out.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, he's got that. I've been listening. So I was listening. Taylor and I were listening to Bob Seger for months, and then lately I was talking to Taylor's dad about this. I got into Led Zeppelin.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what it is about that music, but that is classic rock. That, and it's not even like not classic in the sense that it's going back in time, but classic in the sense that it is a classic sound.
They were way ahead of their time.
Not even ahead, but it was a moment. There was no time wrapped around this music. It was its own thing. And like you listen to Led Zeppelin, you just listen to the beginning of Immigrant Song, or you listen to Black Dog, you listen to, Stairway to Heaven. Like when Stairway to Heaven, you go through it's like an emotional year. Like beginning of the song is like it starts off and you're just kind of zoned in, and then you start hearing about the girl, and then Immigrant Song comes on, and then you listen to Jimi Hendrix. It's not just music; it's what they were doing too. Like these guys were living it.
They were thinking outside the box too.
They were also elevated through the use of psychedelics too.
That's what I mean. Yeah. They were
so they
the
could
box.
Connect with the music. Whereas like Taylor Swift, she goes in the studio to make a hit. These guys went in the studio to make what they loved, and then they released it. And I don't know, just the guitar sounds different. Like I've been listening heavy on Led Zeppelin, The Doors, a lot of Leonard Skinner. And then you see what these guys are wearing. You're like, dude, how would you hear so much about the older generation be like the tough generation? I'm like, these guys are not that. Like he's wearing.
You've seen what they wore in the '60s. I mean, come on.
Yeah, they were hippies.
You had your hippie generation. Yeah. You had all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had badass clothes too, like Black Panthers and stuff, man.
Yeah.
If you saw a dude wear that stuff nowadays walking down the street, you get on the other side of the street.
Yeah.
Some of that clothing was pretty intimidating.
Yeah.
You know? And
then just like that, it was like
Hells Angels,
Eminem, and Tupac, and then it went.
Well,
and then Green Day started coming out.
You went from like real rock and roll. Some people say heavy rock and roll. With Led Zeppelin and the guys, from the '60s. Then all of a sudden you get
Nirvana.
into the '70s where cocaine, bang, was a new thing. Recreational cocaine, discos. And then you had disco.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, come on. I mean, you went from that to disco. And I'm not knocking disco music. I like some of it and stuff too. But it was a whole different thing in the 70s. And then the 80s, I was blessed enough to, all of a sudden we had rock and roll coming back in, which was kind of more mixed in with the whole country thing. And country got all over the place because all of a sudden they lost their identity. And it was kind of like different genres mixed together in the 80s, which is cool for me. I loved it. In the 90s, really good music.
Yeah.
And now you're experiencing something, I think, in this generation, something even different.
It's almost like the way the drugs move is the way the music moves.
A lot of times, yeah, absolutely.
Like 60s, 70s, cocaine, 80s, a lot of weed was coming back. And then the 90s was dark, Like you had Nirvana, you had just, it was the beginning of internet, it was the beginning of seeing yourself everywhere.
Well, yeah, and they kind of brought back the punk movement, too, from the 70s, the Sex Pistols and Johnny Rotten and those guys. And, yeah, Nirvana was kind of doing the same thing where you didn't really understand what they were saying, but the beat was pretty cool. But, man, they were coming out of the nastiest little nightclubs in the world, just competing against each other. The competition. For those guys ever to get out of these nightclubs, they had to be lucky, and they had to be pretty good. Yeah. But they needed breaks. And then you saw what happened with Nirvana,
Yeah, they were characters. Like Kurt Cobain and then Nirvana. Billy Joel, then Green Day, guy for Linkin Park, Curtis, whatever his name was. Then Linkin Park. Right? Yeah, then Linkin Park. You had then rap, Tupac and Biggie came out where these guys were like, I mean, you listen to Biggie, it's like R&B, but like with a harder beat. Like you feel like you're surfing on his words. Then you have Tupac, which makes you just want to put your fist to the wall. And then you get Eminem, who relates to the lower class white people.
And you could go on, and that was all in that same decade. Yeah, you think about that. It's like just a different way. But when I was growing up in the 70s, man, I'm not even kidding. My dad used to watch boxing, so I'd watch boxing, and nowadays it's in the history books, but you had Joe Frazier, George Foreman, Muhammad Ali. You had all these incredible big names in heavyweight boxing. Then you get on down to the Sugar Ray Leonards, the Roberto Durans, the Michael Hearns. It was amazing, the who's who in boxing. I mean, it was incredible. And Roberto Duran, Tommy Hagler, it was these incredible guys that were incredible. And it's weird how sometimes that just happens in a certain generation. All of a sudden you have that many superstar rappers,
Yeah.
The guys who wrote the book. Your mom and I were jamming out to Sugar Hill Gang the other day, and but with the rock and rollers. And then look how many you lost at the same time in the 60s,
Well,
Jim
competition.
Morrison, Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
It's on and overdoses, because they lived by it and they died by it.
Yeah, competition's
Janis
good.
Joplin.
Like, people don't want competition, but if you have Led Zeppelin, you let Lynyrd Skynyrd, you're gonna have to get a little bit better.
With that being said, Led Zeppelin was coming out right around the same time as the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. And you know who the most popular at the time? Album sales? Beach Boys. So you had competition that was unbelievable, and the talent that was coming out at the time.
Yeah.
That was incredible. How does that happen?
You have to, because everybody's so good.
Everybody's so good, and you rise to it.
That's why baseball's getting better and everything.
Yeah, and the Stones, the Who, you see these guys, they're still freaking touring, man. Aerosmith.
Still out there.
How are they doing it?
Elton John is still out there.
Yeah, Elton John's still jamming out.
He's
Billy
different.
Joel.
Like, he's like Billy Joel, Elton John. Those guys to me are like the Mike Trout of Major League Baseball. Like, they could create their own league. Mm-hmm. Like, those would be the first two guys, and then maybe you would get like Michael Jackson if he was still alive. You'd throw Elvis up there.
Well, and then you can even step up another notch when you mention somebody like Michael Jackson.
Yeah, Michael Jackson, Elvis.
In country music, Garth Brooks. Probably nobody will ever touch the records that he set.
He sold the most albums in all music, right?
One time, I think he was right up there with Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, those are the top level guys. And hell, I'm glad Garth Brooks is still doing what he does. But you see what happened to Prince. You see what happened to Michael Jackson. Their star burns brightly, but
it's a different life than country music.
Yeah, I tell you what. Yeah, it's a shame. And you think about all the temptations they have and everything that they have to deal with. I'm perfectly fine with not being famous.
I think I'd have
a real hard time. You imagine Elvis Presley, the Beatles, going on a concert tour, they can't even leave their freaking hotels. I mean, literally, all their entertainment has to be right there and then because you get mobbed. Walk outside the place and boom. I mean, John Lennon gets killed walking down the street because Mark David Chapman wanted to kill somebody who was famous. And he was upset that at one time John Lennon said that the Beatles were more popular than God. Just stupid little things like that. The poor guy was just walking back from his recording studio. Some guy walks up behind him, shoots him in the back, kills him. I mean, for what reason? And think about what John Lennon left us. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Imagine. Probably some people argue the greatest song ever, put pen to paper.
I didn't know who, and it's pretty much like the same words throughout the whole song.
Well, yeah, but different concepts.
I love the
same
song.
Thing.
I love the song.
That song will actually make you think.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think and I love music.
I like everything about Jimi Hendrix.
Jimi Hendrix.
Like that song Joe.
Yeah.
Where he literally talks about a dude killing his wife. You can't come out with that nowadays.
And his star didn't burn that brightly. I think he was 27.
20. He's part of the Magic 27 Club.
Yeah.
Him.
And he came out of the military.
Kurt Cobain's there. He was also black, which is so interesting because during like the biggest time of racial inequality,
yeah.
he's up there. Like it's like it showed like if you were so famous, it didn't matter. But it's not because of him. It's because of music. Music doesn't see race. Art doesn't see race. It never has.
Some people, you gave me that book, Outliers, and I read it, and I was totally intrigued, and I found it incredibly interesting, and how much hard work actually goes into becoming a genius and being incredibly successful at what you do. With that being said, Jimi Hendrix, yeah. I mean, the time that he came in to do music and the kind of music that he chose to do, and you know what? He was just, from what I understand, because I'm not a guitar player, I don't know anything about guitar playing, but even to this day, some people say he's probably the greatest guitar player ever. I mean, hell, he played with the opposite hand on a guitar that was upside down. He played the national anthem, and it's still incredibly beautiful to listen to him play that. Some people said, man, that's incredibly offensive. With that being said, I mean, that dude was a rarity when it came to talent. Yeah. But he was that good, and that's why he was able partially to overcome all the obstacles that he had to overcome.
But he also beat his girlfriend.
Okay.
But that's what I'm saying, like with these artists too. But and that sounds shocking because he is Jimi Hendrix, but we fail to realize no, these are people. Also, these are people just like you and me, So they have their own vices. And I think that's why people get so frustrated with these famous people and that's why I think they struggle so much is because the world only knows them as artists. But like I bet Jimmy and all these people, they have so many other things about them. But you can't showcase that because then to other people, to the people that support you, you're not being yourself anymore. And that's the issue with being famous, especially actors. Like I was saying at dinner, then you have guys like Joe Rogan. You have anybody who does a podcast nowadays. They are who they are all the time. So that anxiety of being famous, it really isn't there.
Well, and I'm glad that they can do that.
Yeah.
Because
it's because of this
honestly,
right here.
Yeah, and when you, I don't know, role models. Man, can you imagine being an athlete? That's what you do is you go out there, say you're a linebacker in the NFL, you go out there to knock other people's heads off. And, to little kids, you have to be this role model because your dad or whatever is telling you, wow, this guy's awesome, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden a little bit of bad press gets out there about you. And you got to try and overcome that, man, because all of us, like you said, all of us have our vices. We all have our weaknesses. We're all just human beings, quite honestly. Ain't none of us perfect. But yeah, it's a lot to live up to. And then you got to say the right things in all these interviews. Like after every game, you got to go out there in front of the doggone thing in the locker room, and you got to give something. And you can't say any billboard material. You can't say that, even though you're feeling it, even though the pregame you've been yelling about what you're going to do to those guys. But you can't say anything that's controversial. You just got to be so careful. Everything has to be sugar-coated. But it's impossible to live up to what people think you should be.
That's why you do what I do, and you just say things that are off the wall, and then it doesn't, I don't know, people get so worried. It doesn't matter. Like, if you say something that's wrong.
Now, I'm also, some of the terminology I think was wrong when I was younger, and I think it has become better, being a little bit more sensitive.
Absolutely.
With some of the issues, that people do have.
Being deliberate. You can't be deliberate about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't be a jerk.
Yeah, don't be a jerk. But so I think some of that sensitivity is good. And knowing people who've given birth to people, say with Down syndrome or something like that, they've made me realize why it is that they're a little bit more sensitive to the way people speak and what they say and just how much jerks people can be. So things can get better.
Down syndrome is one of the weird ones because they know what that word means. And they can tell the difference between them and a neurotypical person.
Uh-huh.
So I've talked to a few people with Down syndrome, and they know what retard means.
Oh yeah.
They don't like it. I also hate how mental illness, the first thing you think of, not mental illness, but those type of illnesses, the first thing you think of is Down syndrome, because that's not fair. Because Down syndrome is like the most not advanced, but most easiest one. Whereas there's some where you just shut down.
Yeah, sure, absolutely, all different levels.
Like Asperger's, autism, MS, all.
But I think it's better that we're more sensitive about that, and we don't just put them into a group. I mean, yeah. So that's an improvement that we're making. But I think that us out there just trying to be the victim and being part of a different victim group and just coming up with, this and that, and this person said something. I think you know me. I mean, when you were young, I was a newsy guy. I paid attention to politics. I get home from work, I'd turn on the news. I'd watch, find out what happened. I'm so far backed away from that. I think there's just so many other things that you can do. You can pick and choose what you do read and what you look at. But there's so many other better things in life that bring you joy and happiness. And what the hell? We were talking about it the other day. You get one shot at this thing.
Yeah.
So, man, try and get as much joy and happiness as you possibly can. Yeah. And don't offend and affect other people while you're doing it. You know?
Don't be dumb.
It's just so much easier just to be helpful and be nice and try to think good things and, deal with the bumps and lumps that come along. All of us have them. And
just be a nice person.
Be a nice person.
And people are good people, too.
I believe more people are good than not good. I'll always believe that.
Everybody has good.
Just the bad gets way too much attention.
Yeah, we are more excited to see bad than we are good.
Absolutely. If it leads, it leads, right?
Yep.
That's what they talk about.
So we did an hour and almost 40 minutes. So that's you've
cool.
Longest podcast. Yeah, hour 52.
Sure, we could probably keep on going, but
yeah,
I think that was good. That was fun.
Yeah.
That was thank you.
Yeah, definitely
Appreciate it.
Yeah, guys. So thank you for watching. If you're on audio, please leave it a rating. If you guys are on YouTube, please like, subscribe, comment. Let me know who you want to see on next. I will be having both my parents on semi shortly. Taylor will be coming along. One of my friends, Steven, David, and my cousin Daniel, and then my sister too. So thank you guys so much for listening.
Take care, guys. Thanks.
Have a good one.
Appreciate it. Hopefully I didn't bore you to death.
Not at all.
Bye-bye.
Peace.